Hey guys, a lot of y'all have been continuously watching these videos. I'm very proud of those of you who have watched 4.1, 4.2, and are now on 4.3. I think that's fantastic. While you're working on these, please work out your work, look in the description to see practice problems at the end, and then show me your work in class so we can talk about it, okay? Because I am very proud of you and I do want to talk about what you've done, okay? So to start off, we're going to start on page 162 in your book. We're on lesson 4.3. I'm going to be explaining example number 1 up here, if you want to follow along. All right, so as we're comparing to figure out which one is bigger, okay, which one's greater. Is it going to be 3/20ths or 16%? Now, everything we learned this far is going to build, okay? So if you're confused on how to change fractions, decimals, or percents, you need to come see me, okay? So, by looking at this, I could choose to change 16% into a fraction, but I find it easier to change my fraction into a percent, so that's what I'm working on right now. If you do it the other way, you're not wrong, but this way will be easier and a lot faster. So to change my fraction into a percent, I always love, remember, I love when I'm changing my fraction into a percent, I love when my denominator is 100, so I'm going to go ahead and put my 100 up there. So 20 times what will give me 100? Well, I know if I have 5 $20 bills in my pocket, that means I got $100. Whatever I do to the bottom, I got to do the top. So I have to do 3 times 5 as well. 3 times 5 is 15. Oh, guys, look, now we have 15 over 100. Whenever we have a number over 100 that's not a decimal, that is our percent. So we know we can move this on over, and this is our percent. Now we can compare our fraction. Now we can compare our two numbers. So now if we look back up here, it's actually comparing 15% or 16% to figure out which one is greater. So 16% would be our answer because 16% is greater. And that should be your final answer. Let's move on. Let's try another one. We're still on example number 1. Next it says which is greater, 79% or 8/100ths. 79% or 8/100ths. So from here, I can really do either or. I can move my decimal to a percent, or I can move my percent to a decimal. Both of them are very quick, and we know quick tricks on how to do them. You can choose whatever you'd like to do. I'm going to choose to move my 79% into a decimal. Now I know that when I go from a percent to a decimal, I'm going to move my decimal 2 spaces to the left. 1, 2. 79% turns into 79/100ths as a decimal. So now the two numbers I'm comparing is 79/100ths or 8/100ths to figure out which one is greater. So now we know that 79% is actually greater, okay? So when my answer in the end, so since I know that this number, 79/100ths, is bigger than 8/100ths, my answer in the end, though, when I put it in my book, is going to be 79%. Do not accidentally write it as a decimal. That would be incorrect, okay? Because the original problem was right here. You need to write it as 79% as your answer, okay? Whatever the original problem was, the answer ends up being, okay? Be careful with that. Now let's try 25% or 7/25ths. Now, I think I want to turn 7/25ths into a percent because I just think that would be easiest. Can you go the other way? Of course you can, but I believe this way would be easier. So I'm going to write my 7/25ths. I need my denominator to be 100 because I feel most comfortable when my denominator is 100. 25 times what gives you 100? Well, if I know if I got 4 quarters, then I got $1, okay? So 25 times 4. We also have to do 7 times 4, okay? So now when you do your 7 times your 4, you know already 4 times 5 is 20, right? So 4 times 6 is going to give you 24, and 4 times 7 is going to give you 28. Some of y'all are going to have to work it out like this, and that is fine. Put it on the side of your paper. You need to know your multiplication facts, but if you don't, put it on the side of your paper and work it out. Start from what you know your 5s, and go down from there, okay? So now you have 28/100ths, all right? Right there, I know I can go ahead and put that into a percent. Take my numerator, move it on over. 28% is my answer. So now I'm actually comparing either 25% or 28%. Remember, I got my 28 from this fraction up here. So I know 28 is bigger, but when I write my answer is actually going to end up being 7/25, okay? When I finally write my answer on my test, okay, it's going to say 7/25 because I got this 28% from my 7/25, okay? So that would be your answer in the end, all right? Be very careful of that. Now, we're going to work on a few more practice problems and I'm going to send you on your way, okay? So let's see. Let's do... Now I'm on page 164 and I'm just looking at some problems from page 164, okay? We're going to do number 1 on page... Oh, I'm sorry. Do number 4 on page 164, okay? This one is at 9/10 or 95% bigger. Let's change my 9/10 into a percent this time. If I change my 9/10 into percent, when I'm going from a decimal to a percent, I take my decimal point 2 spaces to the right. So I'm going to go 1, 2. My percent now becomes 90% or 95%. This is way easier to tell which one's greater like this, okay? So I know my answer would be 95, and I can keep it as 95% because that was from my original answer, okay? So 95% would be my answer. Let's say I do number 5. Number 5 says 20% or 200ths, okay? Let's change my 200ths into a percent. 1, 2, 2 places to the left because we're going from a decimal to a percent. Now I have either 20% or 2%. I know 20% is bigger, so 20% is my answer because that's also from the original problem right here, okay? Next, let's go to something harder. If we're on page 165, I want you to look at number 24. All right, this is where it gets challenging, page 165, number 24. It says you have 66.1%, 66 hundredths, 2/3, and 667 thousandths, okay? So you have these 3 numbers right here, and you have to compare them from, we're going from least to greatest. All right? This is doing a lot at once right here, okay? So I'm going to look at it, and I'm going to figure out what's going to be the easiest thing for me to do here, okay? Now, I think I should keep them all as decimals. We already have 2 decimals in here, and I know how to turn this percent into a decimal pretty easily. And my fraction, I know how to go from a fraction to a decimal, okay? So I think I'm going to feel most comfortable going to a decimal. So let's switch all the ones that are not decimals. My 66.1% has to be turned into a decimal. When you're going from a percent to a decimal, you have to move the decimal 2 places to the left. 1, 2. My new decimal becomes 661 thousandths, okay? Then I have this one right here. Gonna move it on over. That one's fine the way it is. Gonna go ahead and move this one down. Okay, now I have to change this 2/3 into a decimal. When you're changing a fraction to a decimal, this is old information, guys. Your denominator goes on the outside of the house. Your numerator goes on the inside of the house. 3 cannot go into 2. Move your decimal on up because there's technically a decimal behind this 2. Give yourself a 0. How many times does 3 go into 20? Well, 3 times 5 is 15. So 3 times 6 is 18. You have a 2. Place a 0 on in there, bring it down. 3 goes into 20, like we just said, 6 times, which would give it 18. 2, bring it down. Oh, it looks like our decimal's repeating here, guys. So we're going to have 3.6 repeating. Okay, so it's going to keep going. Now we have to order them from least to greatest, okay? So we see that all of them in the tens place has a 6. So we're going to move on from there. In the hundreds place, they all have a 6. Now, in the thousands place, some of them are left empty. We have this one. This one's empty. This one's left empty. So that one would be our least, because technically a 0 right here, okay? There's an imaginary 0 there. Then we have a 1. This would be another 6. This would be a 7, okay? So then our 1 would come next. Then our 6 repeating would come here. Then our 667 thousandths would go there. This would be your final answer from least to greatest, okay? Now, next what we're going to work on. That was a really hard problem, okay? They normally don't get that hard, but I wanted to show you all an example of when it does get hard. Sometimes you might have something. Let's try, this is 17 on page 164 if you'd like to look at it. 68%, 63 hundredths, and 13 twentieths. I think we should change these all into percents, okay? So I'm going to go 1, 2 places to the right. I got to turn that decimal into a percent. Turns that decimal into 63%. My 68% comes on down. Now I just have to change my 13 twentieths into a percent. So if I have my 13 twentieths, I want it to be 100 as a denominator. 20 times what gives me 100? 20 times 5. All right? So whatever you do the bottom, you gotta do the top. 13 times 5. Now, that was pretty hard. A lot of you aren't gonna know off the top of your head. It's okay to write it next to your paper. 5 times 3 is 15. 5 times 1 is 5, plus 1 is 6. 65 is your answer. Now, I can definitely turn that into a percent. My numerator is over 100. Move it on over, 65%. So I'm gonna put my 65% down. On this one, for number 17, it wants us to order it least to greatest. So my smallest percent is 63%. But when I rewrite it, I almost messed up, guys. Watch very closely. So 63% is my least, but I'm going to write what the original number is, okay? So my original number was 63 hundredths. So I need to write it like that, okay? 63 hundredths. Next is my 65%, but it was originally my 13 twentieths. So I'm going to write my original number, 13 twentieths. Then my last one was 68%, and my 68% never got changed. It was originally 68%, so I can just leave it just like that, okay? So this right here would be my final answer for number 17. All right, guys, I want you to check the description for some example problems you can do. Please, if you do anything at home, I want you to come show it to me the next day. I am very proud of you for doing stuff at home, and I'd like to see what you have just to make sure it's all correct, okay? I hope y'all are studying, and we are going to have a chapter test on chapter 4, and you're going to really need to do good, okay? So practice as much as you can. Ask me any questions you need, and I will see y'all tomorrow. Bye, guys.